Senator Tillis and I are coming to the floor today because we have just some incredible frustration and want to be able to bring some facts out to this conversation. I absolutely agree for the federal workers in my state, and there are some phenomenal people that do an amazing job that most people will never know their name, but every day they're getting up to serve the American people. There are folks that are in military every day that are serving the American people. The civilians that surround them, that though they're not listed as federal employees, are intimately connected to what we're doing for the federal task for people. They're trying to figure out this afternoon what's going to happen to them this weekend and next week. They're frantically getting together in offices all over Oklahoma and, quite frankly, all over America, trying to be able to piece together the now what's of a government shutdown, distracting them from getting all the things done that they already need to be done, that they were backlogged on now. For what? The frustration of this whole focus on let's do a government shutdown over not having to have real discussions about DACA and immigration is not only not accurate, but it's also something that is already in process that somehow is being short-circuited. All these federal workers and all these civilian employees that are going through all this turmoil trying to figure out why DACA isn't resolved and why the deadline for DACA is the first week of March and it has to have forced them to be out and have all this chaos now at the end of January is brought utter confusion to everyone, especially when you know the history of this dialogue. Let me walk everyone backwards for just a few months here. In September, the nation was surprised when President Trump announced he is not going to renew DACA. He wants a legislative, long-term fix for DACA. That very day that he made that announcement, I released out a statement saying, in America, we do not hold children accountable for the actions of their parents. We don't do that in American law. Just a couple of days after that, the president called me late one night, and he said, hey, I saw your statement and a report about that. Can we talk about it? And we spent about 20 minutes late that evening just talking about immigration policy and his interest in getting a legislative long-term resolution for DACA for these kids that have to renew every 2 or 3 years and they have no idea what's going to happen. He wanted to have some semblance of permanence for them, but at the same time to also resolve some of the issues in border security that weren't controversial a few years ago. To say we need to deal with some issues of border security, we need to deal with the issue of DACA and give them some semblance of permanence. Can we put this together? At that time, I told the president, actually, Senator Tillis and I are already working to be able to get something together. Because for the last 15 years, the DREAM Act has come up before the House and the Senate, and for 15 years, it has failed every single time. The DREAM Act failed when there was a Democrat president, a Democrat Senate, and a Democrat House of Representatives. That bill is not going to pass. We knew that. So we went to work saying, what is a better solution that will provide some semblance of permanence on this? Our conversation was, a lot of the pushback of why the DREAM Act has not passed in the past is that a lot of Americans feel like, I understand this group of individuals have grown up in our country, pledge allegiance to our flag, speak English, are passionate about where they live. This feels like home to them, but it's not home. They wanted them to be able to have that opportunity, but they didn't want them to be able to, quote unquote, cut in line. So we put in a process to say, here's a way that those individuals could earn the right to be able to be naturalized citizens of the United States. But they have to earn it through a process, just like someone who was international would have to go through that process to be here. But the exception would be they're already here. And they wouldn't have what DACA provided. DACA provided 2 years of we won't arrest you, but no legal status. This would provide immediate legal status and an opportunity after 10 years to be able to earn naturalization. That had never been offered like that before. We worked through all the details of that and laid out a proposal and said this is a section of a larger bill. We feel like this is a way to get past what has blocked the DREAM Act year after year after year and what has been the biggest frustration from many people in the country with the DREAM Act. But our caveat was very consistent. We want to be able to resolve this, but it has to be resolved with border security attached to it. I didn't think that was an unreasonable request. I was surprised to hear that it might be, since in the previous Gang of Eight versions several years ago coming out of the Senate, there was a large section in it about border security. So I assumed this would be a non-issue to be able to partner those issues together. It seems irresponsible to deal with the DACA issue and to not address how did that happen in the first place. To say that we have a secure border and we don't need to address anything would be to ignore 12 million examples in our country of that rule being violated, either through visa overstays or through coming across the border of individuals that wanted to be in our country but crossed illegally instead through the legal process. We're a very open receiving country. 500,000 people a day cross our southern border illegally every day. 500,000 every day. 1 million people a year legally become citizens of the United States. We are not a country that's anti-immigration. We just want it done the right way. We think the law should apply to everyone equally all the time and don't like anything circumventing the law. So here's the history lesson. September the 5th, the president makes that announcement. Within days, we have conversations with the president about it. He agrees we need to be able to have something that's a long-term solution, border security, and for those DACA. Within about 2 weeks, Senator Tillis and I release out the Succeed Act and say this has to be partnered with border security. Thankfully, in our conference at the same time, Senator Cornyn is also working through border security to be able to partner with this. At the same time, Senator Cotton and Senator Perdue are also working on other areas dealing with chain migration, knowing these could all be partnered together to be able to find a final bill. There were individual titles of a larger proposal. We were bringing those out. In October, the President of the United States released out a long report saying, here's what he would like to have in a bill, with great detail into it, to say this is what he expects the bill to be like when it's resolved. So now it's October. He said we have to get this resolved. We've released out 3 different bills. The President's released out something, and we want to start negotiation. Within November, we're in negotiations in a bipartisan group, and every day in the bipartisan group, all of our Democrat colleagues want to talk about is DACA. Every day. Our staffs meet every day. We're meeting every other day as members going through this, sometimes every day, going through it. Every day it's DACA, and every day we bring up, hey, there are other aspects of this we've agreed to. And every day they say, well, let's work on DACA some more. So it finally hit a point in December that I said, when are we going to get to talking about border security? We have got to talk about that. Well, guess what happened? The next meeting I wasn't invited to attend. Neither was I invited to the next one. Neither was Senator Tillis. So our staff finds out they're still meeting and contacts them and says, hey, we're still interested in getting to a bipartisan agreement. They don't respond to our staff emails. They won't even tell us when or where they're meeting. We didn't walk away from negotiations. We were kicked out of negotiations because we believed that this deal needed to have border security in it and DACA. And for a group that said basically, we don't want to deal with border security, they were no longer interested in us. Which brings us to a stalemate of really getting this resolved. Which brought us to 2 weeks ago. On a Tuesday, the President invites us over in a bipartisan, bicameral conversation to say, we've got to get a plan here. This is stuck. And during that meeting with the President, with 26 House members and senators together from both parties, we made an agreement. There will be 4 areas of this final agreement. And these are the negotiators to be able to pull it together. The whip from both the Republican and the Democrat House and Senate. Those 4 individuals will be the individuals to pull it together, and they're going to get that done. That was on Tuesday. By Thursday of that week, a smaller subgroup of the group that I had been kicked out of went back to the President and said, no, we've got a better idea. Let's try to do this instead. I know on Tuesday we agreed to do the other process, but we've got another idea to kind of end-run that whole process. Clearly, it upset a lot of us to say we're trying to do a bipartisan deal. We're trying to work this through the process. We're trying to be good faith in this. And so far, there have not been good faith negotiations on border security at all. We cannot deal with the issue of individuals that are in our country illegally, even if we as Americans see them as neighbors and friends and future citizens of our country, and ignore how it happened in the first place. That would not be responsible of us. Now, there are some that want to say this is because you're just simply a racist, which is infuriating. and inaccurate and belittles the conversation. To stand up and say the only reason you think this is because you're a racist is trying to shut down the conversation, not engage in it. These are my friends and neighbors as well. But we're legislators, and we have a responsibility to solve issues, not belittle each other, and not make false accusations. There are millions of people that have crossed our border to be able to work or connect with family. I fully understand that. Many of them live around my place, go to church with me. I get that completely. But there are also many people that cross our borders because of crime. And we would be foolish to ignore that reality as well. There are people that cross that border to be able to traffic drugs, to be able to traffic in terrorism, to be able to move people, human trafficking, labor trafficking. We should have a secure border set up for that. Again, this used to not be a partisan issue. In 2006, Senator Schumer, and at that time Senator Obama, voted for the Secure Fences Act, which put in 650 miles of fencing on the southern border. Let me say that again. Senator Schumer and Senator Obama and a lot of other Democrat senators that are still here voted for the Secure Fences Act in 2006 to put in 650 miles of fencing on our southern border, because this didn't used to be a partisan issue. And it shouldn't be today. Border security is not partisan, it's national security. The proposals that have come out at times amaze me. Let's actually get serious about trying to resolve these issues. Basic border security issues should involve not just some fencing in some areas or wall in some areas or technology in some other areas, adding additional manpower in other areas. Those are reasonable things along a border that every country in the world is organizing. But it also involves dealing with some of the gaps in our law, that if someone crosses into the United States, things that need to be addressed. For instance, the removal of multiple felony criminal aliens. Why is this controversial? This shouldn't be a controversial issue at all, but for some reason that it is. Ending the practice with greater fines and penalties of people who smuggle in people for profit. Why would that be controversial? But for some reason, it is. Dealing with additional judges, because we have 600,000 people in a backlog in our immigration courts. 600,000 people in our immigration courts in a backlog. Why would that be controversial to not have to deal with a backlog? Why would it be controversial to say we're behind on family members that have petitioned to be a part of this country, but we're, get this, 20 years in a backlog? Why would that be controversial to say we need to divert some of our attention to catching up on the backlog? There are a lot of issues that we need to deal with, and this is a complicated issue. But for other members, can I just say, we're very close to negotiating this if people will actually do good faith negotiations. But saying we'll shut the government down until you do it our way, and their way was an end run around the whole stated process that we'd all agreed on, seems absurd to me. And it certainly seems absurd to the federal workers in my state who are now going through chaos this afternoon because some people wanted to end run around the process that was already in place. Let's finish the process, not try to create some artificial cliff in chaos to try to say, do it my way or I'll shut the government down. Let's finish the process. There are willing partners on both sides, and there are reasonable proposals to be able to finish out what we've already started and worked months on to be able to get to this process. I thank Senator Tillis for the engagement that he has on this, because he and his team have worked exceptionally hard. Myself and my team, both in state and here, have worked exceptionally hard on these issues. We want to get them right. Senator Cornyn and his team have worked exceptionally hard on these issues. Let's do it and let's get it right. But let's not shut the government down while we're in the middle of negotiations, because people want to be able to have it their way and not actually finish the negotiation that we started. With that, I would yield back.